Boker Tov. How's Israel? Hi. It's always the same. Yeah. So if you have these sources, so please open in page 6. There's also additional, you got the additional one? The white one? Yeah. Now in pages 5 and 6, you will find the translation of Ruach Tzal. Ruach Tzal is the ethical code of the IDF. This is a text that Israeli officers study in officer school, and they rehearse it. It's supposed to be, by the way, a small version of our ethical code is supposed to be a part of our commander's equipment. And I want to take a look at the ethical code of the IDF, and specifically, if you go to, there's 10 main values that are supposed to guide our soldiers and our commanders. And specifically, look at human life. You see human life at the bottom of 5. Right? So that's a value. That's a value, an important moral value that our commanders are supposed to follow and supposed to guide them when they make decisions and the way they execute their decisions. Can you forget? Okay. So, human life, Chayei Adam, let's just read it very briefly. An IDF soldier will recognize the critical importance of human life and behave in a safe and measured manner at all times. During combat, the soldier will put themselves and their fellow soldiers at risk only to the extent required to fulfill their mission. Meaning, if you're a commander, doing everything you can to protect your soldiers is a moral value. This is what you're ethically obligated to do. This is what mothers of our soldiers are expecting of our commanders, to do everything not to put their children under risk if it's not a risk that's needed to fulfill the mission. This is, by the way, a very big conversation in Israel. Is the IDF doing everything that they can to protect our soldiers? Are soldiers having the right equipment that can protect them? Are commanders making decisions which are decisions that are smart enough, that are creative enough in a way that will protect our soldiers? By the way, part of the spirit of the IDF is obviously that you have to do everything you can to protect our civilians. That comes from the larger guidance of the IDF. So Chayei Adam, that is an important value. Now I'm going into a different value. Tohar HaNeshek, the purity of arms. An IDF soldier will only exercise their power or use of a weapon in order to fulfill their mission, and only when necessary. They will maintain their humanity during combat and routine times. The soldier will not use their weapon or power to harm uninvolved civilians and prisoners, and will do everything in their power to prevent harm to their lives, bodies, dignity, and property. So what is Torah HaNeshek? I have to do everything that I can in order to make sure that civilians and non-combatants will not be harmed while we are fulfilling our mission. Now, between these two values of Tohar HaNeshek and Chayei Adam, there is a massive tension. Because in theory, we're all for Chayei Adam. We're all for our soldiers protecting themselves and our commanders not doing everything they can to protect our soldiers. We're all for that. We're also all for purity of arms. We have to make sure that we minimize the damage for civilians and people who are not terrorists, people who are not actively involved in the battle. But you could see, if you believe in both values, that in real life, on the ground, they clash. How do they clash? Let's say I'm taking my soldiers, I'm in Khan Yunis with my soldiers. And a drone is saying somebody is aiming an RPG at the tank of your soldiers. But they're aiming the RPG from a hospital. So if I follow Chaye Adam, what am I supposed to do? And if I follow Tohar HaNeshek, what am I supposed to do? Okay, so like if you're following only Tohar HaNeshek, you can't shoot at that terrorist. It's in a hospital. But if I follow Chaye Adam, I have to. I'm morally obligated to take down that terrorist to protect my soldiers. But that means violation of Tohar HaNeshek. What I'm saying is that the idea of a moral army is a little, are we a moral army or not a moral army? There's something infantile in that question. When I don't shoot back at the hospital, I'm immoral because I'm violating Chaye Adam. When I do shoot at that terrorist, I am immoral because I'm violating Tohar HaNeshek. Asymmetric warfare means you're always in a moral tragedy. Moral dilemmas are not binary dilemmas. They're tragic dilemmas. Binary dilemmas is there is good and there's evil, and you have to choose. You have to have the courage to choose the right over wrong. But a tragic dilemma means you have only bad moral options. And there's no way to escape making the bad decision. Which means sometimes you're judged as if it was a binary dilemma while you were in a tragic dilemma. You're judged as if you chose bad over good, when actually, what did you choose? Bad over bad. In your calculation, this was less bad than that bad. The category, the Greek, by the way, category of a tragic dilemma. When you read Tohar HaNeshek and understand how it materializes on the ground, you realize that when you fight in light of our values, you always have to manage a contradiction between two values that you believe in. This is why this is all very, very confusing. We would like to believe we're living in a binary world. You do the right, you have to have the courage to do the right thing and not the wrong thing. But what if you'll always do the wrong thing? What if you'll always violate a value that you believe in? Now, these two values, Tohar HaNeshek and Chaye Adam, are derived from two larger values that the IDF represents as, if you go back to page 4, it designs the 4 fundamental values that the 10 practical values are derived from. Right, go back to page 4. I'm doing this very briefly. And I want to notice 2 values. One value is, the fundamental value is patriotism and loyalty to Israel. Patriotism and commitment and devotion to the state of Israel and its people are the very core of the service of the IDF. Obviously, our soldiers have to be patriotic. They have to have a sense of belonging to Am Yisrael. They have to have a sense of devotion and willingness to sacrifice everything for the collective, obviously. And if they don't behave that way, that's immoral. But then there's human dignity. Look at the next one. The IDF and its soldiers are obligated to protect human dignity. Every individual is of inherent value, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, nationality, gender, or status. So on the one hand, I belong to a particular group, to Am Yisrael. I'm devoted to our collective, protecting my group from other groups, and at the same time, human dignity. Every person from any group has inherent dignity that I have to respect. From these 2 values, by the way, this very particular, so I'm expected to be a patriotic nationalist and an individualist humanist simultaneously. I belong to 2 groups, to the group of the Jews versus the world, and then I belong to another group, to the group of shared humanity with the rest of the world. And from these two foundational values are derived Tohar HaNeshek, human dignity, or Chayei Adam, I have to protect my people, my soldiers. In our shiur today, we're going to be starting in 11, right? Yeah? So I'm not going to be discussing the morality of war and the confusion regarding values. I'll leave that to anyone that wants to continue thinking about this. We'll be discussing classic texts. But this is in the background. This tension that this war has exposed within our code of ethics between values that we believe in. This is in the background. In the Mishnah, in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, it describes what is Rosh Hashanah? What is Rosh Hashanah? What is Aleph Tishrei? What? It's the birth of humanity. That's right. That's in the Gemara of Rosh Hashanah. It says that the world was actually created when? In Kafei Elul, which means your birthday. With creation. So which means that Aleph Tishrei, you're not celebrating the creation of the world, but you're celebrating the creation of humanity. And the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says, this is in the added page, but this is the Mishnah that you all know. In source 3, בארבעה פרקים העולם נידון, בפסח על התבואה, בעצרת על פירות האילן. בראש השנה כל באי עולם עוברים לפניו כבני מרון. שנאמר היוצר יחד דיבם המבין אל כל מעשיהם, ובחג נידונים על המים. So Rosh Hashanah, a human being stands in front of God as what? As a human being, not as a Jew, because in Rosh Hashanah, God is judging kol ba'ei olam. All right? Because you're celebrating the creation of the world according to another opinion, the creation of humanity. And then you go to Shul. And you open the Machzor. And in the Machzor it says that we're in the Chodesh HaShvi'i. And that repeats itself. You have the text here. We're not going to go into them. Throughout the Torah. That Tishrei is not Rosh Hashanah, it's the Chodesh HaShvi'i. And if, according to the Machzor and the Torah, Tishrei is the Chodesh HaShvi'i, so what is the 7th month? So what is Rosh Hashanah? So it's very confusing, is Nisan. So it's very confusing to go to Shul on Rosh Hashanah to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, to open the Machzor and to discover, hey, we're not in the beginning of the year. Where are we? In the 7th month. So that's confusing, celebrating the beginning of the year in the middle of the year. It's very confusing. And obviously the answer is that the calendar of our Machzor, of our Sidur, is the biblical calendar. And the calendar of the person praying is the rabbinic calendar. You're living in two calendars. And according to one calendar, you're in the 1st month. In order to another calendar, you're in the 7th month. Now, living in two calendars is a big deal. It's very confusing. Now, the way you understand your location in time is always about identity. In 1975, the leader of Iran, what was his name back then? Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. He said to his people, we're changing the calendar. What does it mean we're changing the calendar? The calendar in Iran until 1975 was the Muslim calendar. And what is ground zero of Islam? What's the moment that from that moment we start counting? What is it? The Hijra. What's the Hijra? Muhammad, he was 40 in 610. And then he has revelation, he hears voices, he starts sharing them in Mecca. No one really listens to him in Mecca. In 12 years, he managed to accumulate less than 100 followers. That's not a great turnout. And then after 12 years, he moved from Mecca to Al-Madinah, which is a little bit to the north of Mecca. And then he reaches Mecca, and he's accepted. And they accept his Torah, and they accept his leadership. They accept that this is the voice of God. So that moment of the hijrah, of the immigration from Mecca to Al-Madinah, is the moment where Islam broke through. And that's 0. So if your 632 is 0, what is 633? That's year 1. And 634 is year 2. And 1975 is year 1,300 and something, right? Okay, y'all rabbis, so. So Muhammad Reza Shah tells his people, it's not year 1,300 and whatever for Muhammad. That's not that year anymore. We're in year 2,500 and something. Because from now on, we're not counting for the Hijrah. Ground 0 from now on is Cyrus. And when Cyrus founds the Achaemenian dynasty, the Persian Empire, that's ground 0. That's the moment, that's 0. And that's the moment that we start counting from. What is Muhammad Reza Shah telling his people? You're not Muslim, you're Iranians, you're Persian. Our ground 0 is not Muhammad, it's Cyrus. The way you count time expresses not when you are, but who you are. By the way, in 79, when Khomeini takes over, what's obviously one of the first things Khomeini does? Changes it back to, no, you're wrong, it's not year 2,500, it's year 1,300. You're wrong, you didn't count it right. What does it mean to live not in one calendar, but in 2 calendars? In one calendar, we are celebrating the birth of humanity. The other calendar, we're celebrating the birth of Am Israel. What does it mean that you celebrate 2 birthdays? You have 2 calendars. Birthdays, for years Jerry Seinfeld has a great comment about birthdays. What's the big deal about birthdays? What's the big deal? Why are people so excited when someone has a birthday? What's the achievement that you're celebrating when someone's birthday? What is it that they did to deserve this celebration? So he says, their great achievement is that they managed not to die for an entire year. Kol hakavod. It's not that you got, my daughter's trying to get a driver's license and there's going to be a big party when she has a driver's license. That's horrible. But she has a driver's license, so there's this thing, they do parties. You finish your bagrut, you finish your PhD, whatever it is, you celebrate it. What do you celebrate in a birthday? Nothing. It's a show, it's about nothing. You celebrate, you didn't die for an entire year, which is what's deep about birthdays. You don't celebrate something that the person has done, you celebrate their existence. You celebrate not what they did, but who they are, their very existence, which means a precondition for really celebrating a birthday is to love someone. We are celebrating, in Rosh Hashanah, you're entering a birthday party for humanity, which means it's our most universalistic, humanistic Chag. We're celebrating creation. We're celebrating humanity. Chamol al kol ma'asecha. Have compassion for all of your creation. And that includes everyone. That's one birthday. The second birthday is Pesach. And that's a birthday for your nation, for your people, for your belonging. This is special. This is unique. This is who we are. The tensions, you see, until the foundation of the state of Israel, the tension between 2 birthdays, living in 2 calendars, the tension between 2 identities, the tension, It was a theoretical, interesting tension. But it wasn't halachic, meaning it wasn't challenged. How do you manage that tension? How do you celebrate that tension? Now it's only when it contradicts each other. Only when you have to make tough ethical decisions, only you have to sacrifice one for the other. Only then is the tension. Are you not only enjoying thinking about the tension, but you actually have to live the tension in a real way. And this is something that I want to speak about. How do we conceptualize living in two calendars, living in two stories? How do you conceptualize that? And we have a lot of work to do. You have koach? We have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of text here, and I was thinking about this. We're not going to manage to get all the texts done. So I want to offer some guidance about how to work through these texts. So we're going to start with narratives regarding the end of history. Now it's interesting, in the Tanakh, Isaiah has one vision of how history is going to end. And that's played out in Isaiah 2, and that's source number 11. It's a source you all know. While you study this source, have in mind that maybe this source is an interesting dialogue with Migdal Bavel. Okay, that's Isaiah 2. I would skip source number 12 for now and move to Ezekiel, source number 13. Ezekiel, source number 13, Ezekiel is in dialogue with Isaiah part 2. So have this in mind. If Isaiah chapter 2 is in dialogue with Genesis, with Migdal Bavel, Yechezkel, Lamed Chet and Lamed Tet are in dialogue with Isaiah 2. Now there's a lot. You're going to be studying the whole vision of a Gogu, Magog. There's a lot there. We don't have enough time. So just read Ezekiel from source 13 until verse 23. Okay? You know what? All you need to do is just read Isaiah 38 and not 39. That will be enough. There is enough there to make this comparisons. Ezekiel, not Isaiah, Ezekiel.
Just to clarify, you mean Migdal Bavel, because you said Migdal David and Bavel.
Ever since I turned 50, I'm losing my marbles. So when I said Migdal David for some reason, I mean Migdal Bavel. Okay. I know where the David came from. It's coming, but this has nothing to do with it. No, what scares me is I don't notice I'm making these mistakes. Okay. Okay. Now, the machloket between Isaiah and Yechezkel is, you could skip Micha. I mean, I like Micha, but you could skip Micha. That's 14. And move to Tzfania and Yoel. The machloket between Yeshayahu and Yechezkel is also played out as a machloket between Tzfania and Yoel. If you can capture that, it's a very deep machloket about how is history going to end. And there's a school of Yeshayahu and Tzfania and Zechariah, and there's a school of Yechezkel and Yoel. These are different schools, different understandings of how this is all going to end. And just like, by the way, the machloket about time, like when are we in time? It's not about time, it's about identity. Also the machloket about how time ends is a machloket not about when does history end, but who are we at this point in history. Okay, after we establish that, so I want to go in. So these are just grand theories, historiosophical theories about the structure of history. I want to go into two figures, real biblical figures, and see where they fit in. And one is David, and the other is Shlomo. Now, I'm not asking you to read every David's biography in Shmuel Beit, or Shlomo's biography in Melachim Aleph. It's way too much. I want to understand how did they end up? So in Shlomo, just read his in Shlomo, source 17, this is the speech he gave in the foundation of Beit HaMikdash, which you have here a glimpse into Shlomo's theology. Try to ask what is his theology? And then in source 18, you have Shlomo's sin. So I understand his theology and his sin. His sin is the way it's described in Kings, in Melachim Aleph. And then finally, the way Divrei Hayamim sees David's, I don't know if sin, but his wrongdoings, or something, there is a negative approach, Dafka and Divrei Hayamim, towards David. Okay, so you have two schools of the end of history, and then the most dominant figures in biblical history, David and Shlomo. How does the Bible see them? And then finally, after that, it's a lot. To the beginning, I want to see how Rambam manages this tension. And I want to offer a fresh reading of something that maybe some of you have been studying here. In Sefer Kinyan and in Mishneh Torah, there are Hilchot Avadim. And in chapter 1, there's how you're supposed to... So I just wanted to study these texts from Hilchot Avadim. How are we supposed to treat Eved Ivri? And then towards the end, he has a comment about Eved Lo Ivri, Knaani. How does he manage this tension? You'll see your texts about, in here, Milchemet Reshut and Milchemet Mitzvah from Sotah, from Traktat Sotah. If you have time, go into it. I doubt you'll have time, but if you'll have time, go into that text also in Traktat Sotah. So, was this clear? King Solomon liked, in Seinfeld, there's that episode where the Jews can only be attracted to non-Jews. You know that episode in Seinfeld? No? The Shakes appeal? No, listen. When I speak to young people, we don't know Seinfeld, which means you can't speak to them. Right. But you all know Seinfeld, right? Yeah. The Shakes appeal? Yes. Okay. So, some people, the kids today, they like Friends for some reason, which is such a deep cultural misunderstanding.
False either or.
What?
False either or. Did I say it's a false either or? Francis.
I know, I think it is either or. There's a clear binary distinction. So Shlomo, he married all Nashim Nochriot, the foreign women, Moaviot, Ammoniot, Edomiot, Tzedoniot, Chitiot, מן הגויים אשר אמר השם לישראל לא תבוא בהם והם יבואו בכם. God asks us not to marry, no intermarriage. Protect your uniqueness. Protect your boundaries of your identity. And Shlomo violated it. And not only did he marry all these foreign women. What did he do? I'm skipping to verse 5. וילך שלמה אחרי השתאות אלוהי הצידונים. ואחרי במקום שיקוץ המונים. He did not only marry the women, what did he do? He worshipped their gods. And how did it look like? וירא שלמה הרע בעיני אדוני, ולא מינה אחרי השם כדוד דוד. He wasn't like David. Of course he wasn't. He's the opposite. אז יבנה שלמה במה לכמוש שיקוץ מואב. In Jerusalem, there'll be a small temple for the god of Moab. Baharash Yerushalayim, Ulemolech Shikutz Me'amon, and also to the god of the Ammonites. וכך עשה לכל נשיו הנוכריות, מקטירות, מזבחות, לאלוהיהם. He's going to build a temple for every god in Jerusalem. In his speech, he spoke about that Jerusalem will be a center, a universal center of worship. That was his vision. But how was that vision implemented? Instead of it being a universal center of worship for one God, it became a cosmopolitical center of worship for all gods. How is this playing out? How is this playing out? We have David, Yin, Shlomo, Yah. David is like, David, by the way, also David has a theology of his own. I didn't put it in your text. I forgot to. I'm sorry. But it's because it's only one pasuk. David, we have a glimpse into his theology in Shmuel Aleph, when David escapes. Shaul is chasing and persecuting David. There's a moment where David has to leave the boundaries of Israel and go to Moab or to other places in order. אפשר להוריד את הווליום? David has to escape the land of Israel in order to escape Shaul. How does he interpret the fact that he had to leave the boundaries of Israel when he escapes Shaul? There's a moment where he tells Shaul, "What did you do to me? You forced me to leave Eretz Yisrael. What did you do to me?" And he has a theological explanation of what it means that he forced him. I'm reading this one pasuk from Shmuel Aleph, Perek Kafvav, pasuk Yutet. Okay, you can write it down if you want. David says to Shaul, "Im bnei Adam arurim em lifnei Adonai," the people that convinced you to chase me, arurim, they're cursed. Why? Ki girshuni hayom milistapeach benachalat Adonai lemor lech avod Elohim acharim. I'll read it again. The people who made you chase me, and as a result, I had to leave Eretz Yisrael. Girshuni hayom milistapeach benachalat Adonai. What is the land of Israel? It's God's territory. And when I leave this territory, de facto, what do I have to do? Worship foreign gods. It kind of seems like, what's the theological perception of David? God is the God of this country, of this nation. So if David has an understanding of a national God, the God of this land, how does his diplomacy look like? We're not one religion that's supposed to unite humanity. It's my God versus your gods. From theology comes the diplomacy, or with David it's the lack of diplomacy. But what you see is David fought wars, therefore he can't build a temple for the one God. Shlomo made peace. That led him to build many temples for many gods. So what do you see here? What does that mean that the critique of David's militarism, you can't build one temple for one God. The critique of Shlomo's universalism, it ends up in building many temples for many gods. What's the sin of... What happens when the David instinct appears without the Shlomo instinct? Or the Shlomo instinct appears separate from the David instinct? What happens? This is a critique. The Bible is a critique of the over-militarism of David and the over-universalism of Shlomo. You see, in theory, there's the Judaism of Yeshayahu and the Judaism of Yechezkel. the Judaism of Tzfanya and the Judaism of Yoel. In theory, we have two different narratives of what this is about. Is it us connecting to the world or us needing to protect ourselves from that hostile world? These two, that Herzl picked up on this and creates two Zionisms around these two instincts. But when every instinct appears by itself, not softened by the counter-instinct, so it leads either to David not building the Mikdash or Shlomo building way too many Mikdashim. Adkan, we finished our second shiur. What's our time now? What's the time? I don't have.
18.
We have 12 minutes left? Yes. Oy, oy, oy. I didn't plan this well. I was thinking a lot about how to do this. We have 12 minutes left?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to use now the text that is the one pager. One pager. In source number 2 in the one pager from Masechet Brachot. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Avina, כל האומר תהילה לדוד בכל יום 3 פעמים, מובטח לו שהוא בן העולם הבא. There is one chapter in Psalms that if you say 3 times a day, you're set. You're ben ha'olam haba. And what's the chapter? It's Ashrei. It's one chapter from Ashrei. Now, what is Ashrei? Now, I want to know this. And Ashrei, we say 3 times. I don't want to say we, but the people wake up in the morning. Yes, 3 times a day. What's the 3 times you say Ashrei? Twice in Shacharit, once in Mincha. Which means there isn't anything that we say as much as we say Ashrei. Shema, you say how many times? Twice. So Ashrei, this is the source. You have to say 3 times. It's the most dominant prayer you have to say. What? And it's only Chayav twice. Tfilat Arvit Reshut. Now, so in Tehillim, now if you look at Ashrei, I didn't ask you to study Ashrei and Chavuta because I'm sure you're pretty rehearsed on Ashrei, so to save time. But in Ashrei, we learned from Martin Luther that's not Martin Luther, Martin Buber. Yeah. That if in a text, if there's a word that appears or a phrase that appears many times in the text, that word is the key to the secret of the text. In Ashrei, what's the word and the idea that appears again and again? Take a quick look. What is the word that appears again and again? Kol. Kol. Let's just read from Pasuk Lamed just to listen to this. Malchutcha malchut, kol olamim, umemshaltecha bechol dor vador. Somech Adonai lechol hanoflim, וזוקף כל הכפופים. עיני חול אליך ישברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעיתו. I'm skipping a bit. קרוב אדוני לכל קוריו, לכל אשר יקראו באמת. Beforehand it says, טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו כל מעשיו. What is this פרק? God is colorblind. God doesn't know what religion you are, what ethnicity you are, what's the color of your skin. Korov Adonai, who gets close to God? Jews, Christians, who gets close? Korov Adonai, lechol korav lechol asher bemet. God has compassion to who? Tov Hashem lakol. Verachamav is compassion al kol ma'asav. That's Rosh Hashanah. Chamol Hashem al kol ma'asecha. So this is probably the most universalistic, humanistic perek in the Tanakh. Karov Hashem lechol korav lekol asher yikru be'emet. The chapter that cancels all different, that we're all, no one has a monopoly over their connection with God. And there's no one that God cares about more than others. This is a Shlomo text, a Yeshayahu text, a Tzfanya text, a Alt Neuland text. We're here for the world. But interesting, when Chazal turned this text into a text as a part of our tefillah, it attached other verses to it. And the verse you say right before you say the most universal text in the Tanakh, you say, Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, Ashrei ha'am she'adonai Elohav. This is trying to pray. Now let's see you pray on the one hand, the emotional sentiment of Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, Ashrei ha'am she'adonai Elohav. That you feel a strong sense of loyalty to one nation, to your nation that you belong to. And it's a special nation, it's the God's nation. And after you internalize that, what do? Karov Hashem lechol korav. Can you say this? Ashrei is the unity of opposites. Ashrei is the yin and yang. And the ancient symbol of yin and yang is that the whole doesn't come from the yin defeating the yang or the yang defeating the yin. Where does the whole come from? It comes from searching for a dynamic balance between the two. That's Ashrei. What's the problem of David? It's Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo. It's national uniqueness that leads to over-militarism. Okay, you can't build. Okay, that was great what you did. But that's not going to take you to God. And what's Shlomo's sin? Karov Hashem lechol korav, kol. And towards the end of his days, he turns his back on his unique tradition, on his authentic tradition. He loses his identity in the name of this vision of humanity uniting. Okay, now this is all words, okay? This is all yin and yang, two narratives. And instead of choosing one narrative over the other, Ashrei unites them and you celebrate the yin. Okay, that's beautiful. That's nice. I learned something once from David Hartman, is that the only place where ideas matter is when they guide you through halacha. Why? This is a great Hartman idea. Because sometimes ideas, you could appreciate them just because they're aesthetic. It's because it rhymes. But halacha, like when you have to decide what do real people do in the real world, like in our code of ethics, then it's not living the contradiction, it's so sophisticated. What is that? Now you have to make very, very tough choices. And now the question, how do ideas really guide you? Are you willing to stand behind your ideas when it becomes concrete? And here, with this in mind, I would like to offer a reading of a text that maybe some of you learned before, Hilchot Avadim. And did you manage to get around to this in Chavruta? I needed you. Okay. None of you made it? So some of you did, okay. I'm not good in calculating how long did things take. But probably no one made it to Sotah, right? Wow. Okay, how much time do we have left? I'm out of time. Can we? How much time do you give me? Is this on? Is it what? Yeah, we're coming back here, but not the steady text to discuss the implications, to ask questions about,
10 minutes.
Okay, so let's try this 10 minutes. So very, very briefly. Hilchot Avadim is the last Hilchot of Sefer Kinyan. And I know it feels uncomfortable to speak about Hilchot Avadim. Right? It feels uncomfortable. The laws of slaves. If you have a slave, how do you have to treat the slave? And obviously you feel uncomfortable with this, like, really, halacha has to regulate how you treat slaves? Slavery itself is an abomination. But what Rambam does in an ancient world where in the biblical world, where slavery was a part of the economy, so Rambam tries to derive from that what is Hilchot Avadim, the laws that regulate your relationship with slaves. And he says, regarding Eved Ivri, if you read through the Hilchot of Eved Ivri, what's the de facto result? What's the impact of all the laws regulating your relationship with an Eved Ivri, with a Hebrew slave, if you're the master and he or she are the slave? So on the one hand, you can't humiliate them. You can't give them jobs that are just for the sake of showing the power gap between you and them. Jobs that are for the sake of the power gap. That is called parich, avodat parich. And then he says, every time you eat, you have to feed your slave the same quality of food that you're enjoying. And just like you have rest, you have to have your slave has to have the same level of rest and the same dignity that you have, they have. And the sum of all the regulation, what does de facto do? De facto, it turns that person from a slave to what? To a person working for you. To a person working for you, and there's limits to what you could tell them what to do and what not to do. And you have obligations for them when it comes to feeding them and taking good care of them, just like you take care of yourself. Which means it's a classic Talmudic move. In the end, you're saying, okay, he's your slave, but here's the list of halacha, that the result is that what? He's not your slave anymore. So it maintains the word while it empties it from its content. De facto, halacha cancels slavery without the declaration of canceling slavery. It's like a difference between, well, I don't have time, but just forever pick up this reference. It's the difference between the way the British went to march towards democracy and the French. The French said, monarchy is bad, so what should we do? Kill the king. The French said, well, let's just start taking authorities from the king and move them to the people. And in the end, what did I just say? The French. It's my marbles again. And in the end, what will happen? The king will be like a symbolic figure, but we'll keep the word, we'll keep the institution, will be emptied from substance. So, Talmudic revolutions are always more British than French. It's not about canceling slavery. No, it's about keeping he's your slave, but de facto. And by the way, the Talmud knew exactly what it was doing. And Rambam mentions this, the amount of, all the laws of Hilchot Avadim amount to the following line, Kol hakoneh eved ivri, ki'ilu kana adon le'atzmo. Let that land. Your obligations towards your slave is so much that in the end, Kol hakoneh eved ivri is you didn't buy a slave. What did you buy? A master, because you always have to take care of him because you're responsible for his well-being. Okay, so beautiful. There's like a British-style revolution of canceling slavery without declaring ideologically that we canceled slavery. Meod yafeh. There's only one problem. What if it's an Eved Knani? Eved Knani mutar lirdot bo bafarich. You're allowed everything that you can do to an Eved Ivri, you can do to an Eved Knaani. Halachically, how does Rambam deal with that? That the halacha that we love because it de facto cancels slavery, discriminates against the Goyim and creates a hierarchy between Jews and non-Jews. How does Rambam deal with that? Now, this is a broader question for Rambam, because Rambam has a universalistic philosophy that all human beings are equal, that we're all created in Tselem Elohim, and our Tselem is our intelligence, and our intelligence is universal, and we all have the same value. He has a universal philosophy. But the halacha that he practices is a halacha that in many places is not universal. It's not equal. And there is discrimination against non-Jews on the halacha. So how can you attach a universalistic philosophy with such a particularistic body of laws? Now, this is just one example of how does Rambam the philosopher and Rambam the legislator, how can they live together? And here's how Rambam does it. Now we'll read from source 2. From source 2. מותר לעבוד בעבד כנעני בפרך. According to the law, you are allowed to have if a slave is not an eved ivri, there is parech. All the regulation do not apply here. ואף על פי שהדין כך, even though the law is that way, מידת חסידות ודרכי חוכמה. מידת חסידות ודרכי חוכמה are words in the Rambam to describe religious excellence. מידת חסידות ודרכי חוכמה שיהיה אדם רחמן ורודף צדק, ולא יכביד עלו על עבדו, ולא יעצר לו, ויאכילהו, וישקהו מכל מאכל, ומכל משקה, מכל משתה. חכמים ראשונים נותנים לעבד מכל תבשיל ותבשיל שיהיו אוכלים, ומקדימים מזון בהמות ועבדים לסעודת עצמם. הרי הוא... Okay, so what he's saying here, what is he saying? He's creating a distinction between the law and excellence, right? What does it mean to be a normative citizen? I guess obeying the law. What does it mean to be an excellent citizen? It means you volunteer. It means you go beyond the law in service of your society, right? What does it mean to be a normative Jew? To obey the law. What does it mean to be an excellent Jew? So what Rambam does, he creates this category of Jewish excellence. And he says, Midat Chasidut, according to the law, you're allowed to discriminate against your Eved Knani. But if you want to strive for Jewish excellence, it's a different category. And this is what Rambam does. The way he marriages his particularism and his universalism, the law is particular, but your universalistic aspirations are expressed in Judaism not through obeying the law, but through going beyond the law, through striving for excellence. And this is an important now the way he develops this category, there's 3 important things to say about this category, and with that we'll end. Let's read this quickly. הרי הוא אומר, כעיני עבדים על יד אדוניהם, כעיני שפחה על יד גבירתה, וכן לא יבזהו ביד, ולא בדברים, לעבדות בשרן הכתוב, לא לבושה, ולא ירבה עליו צעקה וכעס, לדמה ריבו בנחת וישמע טענותיו. You're supposed to have a relationship with your Eved Knani and listen to, effectively turning him into an Eved Ivri. And how does he explain it? וכן מפורש בדרכי איוב הטובים שישתבח בהן, אם אמס משפט עבדי ואמתי בריבה ממדי. It's interesting that he quotes Iyov in order to justify developing this category of Jewish excellence. Jewish excellence is treating the non-Jew just like he's a Jew. Where does he learn that from? From the Tanakh. But which figure in the Tanakh does he learn this from? From a non-Jew. So he learns Torah, Tanakh. Rambam understands that the Tanakh gives biblical authority to non-Jews. When you quote Iyov and when you are inspired by Iyov, you are inspired by a non-Jew. The Tanakh does that to us. So we're inspired by a non-Jew, and what's the content of the inspiration? Not to discriminate against non-Jews. And by this, all connected. If I believe that Jews are somehow have a monopoly over a connection with God, I can't learn from non-Jews. And usually then I also discriminate against them. But I could learn Torah, I could learn what God wants from me from a non-Jew. And that guides me how to treat non-Jews. And then he continues and he says, Halo babeten osani osehu v'yichoneneu berechem echad. We were all human beings come from the same rechem. How do you say rechem? Womb. Okay, so let's notice one thing. When I practice halacha, I practice it as a Jew. When I practice excellence, I practice it as what? As a human being. Now, when I'm in halachic mode, I'm a Jew, and I could see in front of me a Gentile. But when I'm in Jewish excellence mode, I am a human being. Celebrating Rosh Hashanah, celebrating the birthday of humanity. I am a human being, and what do I see in front of me? Human beings. So what you see is a result of who you are. When you feel that you're a Jew, you see Jews, non-Jews. When you're a human being, you see human being. At this moment, to move from law to excellence is moving from perceiving the world as a Jew to perceiving the world as a human being. And then he continues, ואין האכזריות והעזות מצויה אלה בעכו"ם עובדי עבודה זרה. אבל זרעו של אברהם אבינו, והם ישראל שהשפיע עליהם הקדוש ברוך הוא טובת התורה, וציווה אותם בחוקים ומשפטים צדיקים רחמנים הם על הכל. וכן במידותיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא שציוונו להידמות בהם, אומר ורחמיו על כל מעשיו. So we're back to Ashrei. וכל המרחם מרחמים עליו שנאמר ונתן לך רחמים ורחמך וירבך. What does it mean to be like God? What does it mean to be like God? God is colorblind. God is, who does he feel? Rachamav al kol ma'asav. So being like God is having compassion that doesn't see ethnicity, that doesn't see difference. Rachamav al kol ma'asav. So here's, I think, an important distinction between the norm and the excellence. These are two distinctions. The second distinction is that the norm is about obeying God. The excellence is about imitating God. Imitatio Dei, imitating God. And obeying God means there is the law. The law says you only have to be nice to an Eved Ivri. That's obeying God. But imitating God is Tov Hashem lakol verachamav al kol ma'asav. So this is how, halachically, how Rambam is creating a category that could marry these two narratives. And this is through creating the distinction between norm and excellence. In norm, you experience yourself as a Jew, and then you see Jews and Gentiles. Excellence, you're a human being. You're inspired by Iyov, and you see human beings. The norm is about obedience to God. The excellence is about being like God. But then finally, with this, this halachic attempt to start now taking these narratives and put them together, I just want to notice it's a very patriotic text. In what sense is it patriotic? When he's telling people, when he's telling Jews, do not discriminate against Evet Knani. And by these are the last words of Sefer Kinyan. Rambam likes to end his books with an insight into his grander philosophy. And he's saying here, he's saying something interesting, paradoxical. Rambam was a big believer in Pygmalion effect. Meaning, Rambam thought that descriptions of reality are not accurate descriptions of reality are not important. Having an accurate description of what really happened historically is not important. I wrote a PhD about this. This is one thing I know. That Rambam's philosophy of history, that he thought that describing events as they are is not important. Because Rambam understood that the way you describe things is not supposed to reflect them. The way you describe things has an impact on them. If you tell a child that he's not so smart, are you describing to him what he is? Or you're shaping who he is. If you tell someone, so Rambam was a big believer in Pygmalion effect, and that in line, I just want to read this again. He says, "Ve'ein ha'achzariyut ve'azut mitzuya ela be'akum uvdei avodah zara." Viciousness, discrimination is what goyim do. אבל זרעו של אברהם אבינו, הם ישראל, השפיע עליהם הקדוש ברוך הוא, טובת התורה, וציווה אותם בחוקים ומשפטים צדיקים רחמנים הם על הכל. So on the one hand, let's just notice this. He's telling the people, you are better than the non-goyim, than the non-Jews. And what does it mean that you are better than non-Jews? You can't discriminate against non-Jews. Now, by the way, I just want to, this paradox changes what patriotism is. Is patriotism about, I feel so unique, therefore I don't care about who's not in my group? Or my uniqueness is that I care for those who are not in my group? When you talk to soldiers fighting this war, after a year and 10 months of fatigue, here's one thing that I realize that people could listen to. And that's not, and that's that your ethical sensitivities when you're fighting this important war to protect our country regarding balancing Tohar HaNeshek and Chayei Adam. By the way, what's a greater challenge for a soldier that's a year and 10 months in Khan Yunis? Tohar HaNeshek or Chayei Adam? What's a greater challenge? Chayei Adam, it's our instinct to protect ourselves. It's an important moral value. Tohar HaNeshek is harder, and there is fatigue. And there is fatigue, and you're afraid, and there is fatigue. So do you think if you come say as soldiers, well, we're all equal, and us and that we're all the same, therefore we have to be sensitive? That's one. Or the Rambam way. What's Rambam's way? Because you're special. Because maybe I'll end with the story. A friend of mine, a rabbi from the US, told me this story, and with this I'll end. It was in Trump's first term. There was a Somalian lesbian that managed to escape Somalia, where she was persecuted because of her way of life. She made it to the US, and she was put in prison as an illegal immigrant. There was a community that a friend of mine, who was a rabbi of this community, adopted her. And my friend, the rabbi, went to visit her in prison. And he went to visit her, and the person that took him into the elevator all the way to meet her, that person was trying to create small talk. And he was saying to the rabbi, okay, so you're going to visit this Somalian refugee? He said, yes. And then he says to him, so are you're also Somalian? And he says, no, I'm Jewish. Why did you think that that I'm not? He had this he has this beard. Like, it's hard, really hard not to notice. So he says to him, "Oh, because I thought that because you're Jew, I couldn't." What? Yeah, why would you, so he said, if you're Jewish, so why are you doing this? And he answered, I'm doing this because I'm Jewish. Because I'm Jewish. Now, this misunderstanding, if you're Jewish, why would you care? Why would you do this if you're Jewish? I'm doing this because I'm Jewish. Rambam says, how does he try to shape, to move people from the law to excellence? Excellence is Tov Hashem lakol v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. Excellence is about seeing not Jews and non-Jews, but seeing humanity. Excellence is about imitating God, not obeying God. How do you move people? Not by forgetting their patriotic instincts, but by speaking directly to their patriotic instincts. Maybe that's how you connect the yin to the yang. These two narratives that I've tried to go through, different narratives of the end of history, different biblical figures living these narratives, David and Shlomo, Ashrei that's trying to pray this distinction, to pray this contradiction, but in halacha itself, the way the glue of Rambam is creating two separate categories of halacha and midat chasidut. I hope you found this helpful. Toda rabba. Thank you.